Sorry. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you're located today. We're just going to be starting our webinar shortly. Today we're talking with Leia Swanberg, our CEO, and she's going to be talking about everything birth related for our surrogates. We'll be starting in just a few moments. We're just going to be waiting for a few more attendees to log on. I just want to let you know that if you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the question area, and Leia will be answering everything at the end. If you don't happen to feel comfortable asking questions today, do message our Facebook page and we'll make sure to get you the right information afterwards.
Hi, everyone. So we'll just wait a few more moments for some of the participants to join. If at any point you have to jump off the webinar to manage kids or get back to work or whatever the case is, please know that this will be recorded and Jordan will be able to send you the recording so you can catch up on either questions that people asked or information that you may have missed. So we will get that out to you in the coming days. And if you have any suggestions for any future webinars, please let Jordan know. She will be planning and assisting me with getting a bunch of information out to you as soon as you ask for it. So let me just check and see if people have joined us. They have. So let me check the time. So we'll just wait one more moment and then we will get started. Okay, my notes are ready. So welcome everyone. Surrogacy not only is my business, but it's my passion, having been a surrogate twice, 15 and 13 years ago. I was able to help complete 2 families and it was absolutely amazing. I'm also a mom of 5. My oldest is 28 and my youngest is 3, just about 4. So I have been having babies for most of my life. And, you know, again, not only is surrogacy my passion, but birth is as well. And so I am so grateful that you have joined this webinar in order to learn more about the birth process when it comes to surrogacy and maybe how to navigate some of the tough questions you might be asking yourselves and really just how you're going to manage the process. I just want to make sure, Jordan, can everybody that is on hear us? If you can't hear us, can you post into the question box so that we know you can't hear us? I just like to double check that before I get too far into things. I know there's many people, you know, there's many people that are joining us sort of as we go. Perfect. Nobody has said that they can't hear us, so I'm imagining everyone can. As long as you can hear me and see me, we're good. So again, welcome to the people that are just joining. I am super excited to talk about birth, and you know, many of you are in various stages of your journey, so I'm going to start at the beginning and talk about your own births and your own birth preferences and how it relates to surrogacy. So over the years, I've met so many amazing women participating in surrogacy who are so excited to help people become parents. And, you know, they're just, this is going to be great. I'm going to help these people become parents. And the birth maybe isn't something that's imminently on their mind. They're just sort of so excited about the entire process. And so when they fill out the application form with our agency or another agency, or when they meet up with their friends that they're going to do an independent journey with, they maybe haven't thought that through. So my suggestions are very simple: to really spend a bit of time, even if you're matched, but maybe you're not pregnant yet, or you're in the initial stages of pregnancy, to start the conversation with your intended parents, or start the conversation with the intake staff that is preparing your surrogate profile. Really share what is important to you during birth, what values you have around childbirth, what birth has looked like for you in the past, and what your plans are around a surrogacy. And often when I start with that, people will say to me, well, you know, I don't really care. I just want to have a baby for someone. And, you know, when I probe a little deeper and we start to have a conversation and I say, okay, well, you know, are you okay with delivering in a hospital? Well, no, I've always had my babies at home. That's important information. And so as you're talking about it, to really, you know, share your birth preferences with everyone who will listen. If you're wanting to have a VBAC or a vaginal birth after a cesarean section, if you're wanting to birth at home, if you're wanting to birth in a birth center, those are birth preferences that I sort of say are immovable. So any intended parent that's going to partner with you, because this is a partnership, whether it is talking about the number of embryos to transfer, to the birth, to the room that you may or may not share post-birth, your immovable or your preferences or, you know, decision-making factors around who you're going to work with as intended parents matter. And so as you're building your profile as a surrogate, to really note those down. You know, I also suggest that, you know, as you're beginning the process, that you really think about who's going to be there, who's going to be at your birth. Are you going to have a doula? And if you are, it's really important that you include that in your profile so the intended parents understand that that's a financial responsibility that they're going to need to take on. Is your partner going to be at the birth? Is your best friend going to be there? And it's important so that the intended parents, understand that you have a support system and those people will be present, but as well so the intended parents know that while this is their baby, you've got a plan to bring their baby to them safely, and it includes having your own support there. And so as we're talking about that, you know, it's really important to sort of lay the groundwork, set those expectations for your intended parents as early on as possible. And then once you've set them, knowing that birth is quirky and, you know, sometimes the best laid plans go out the window. And so today I really want to touch on, you know, all the things I think are super important, and then I hope to answer questions if anyone has questions, and we will go from there. So what's really important at the outset is that in your legal contract that you have drafted with your intended parents, that you list the hospital you plan to birth in. And obviously that could change. You may move, your hospital may reroute you to another center if you happen to deliver early, but having that written down, having that information of, you know, of the planned place of birth, whether that's a birth center or at home, who your care provider is going to be, whether that's a midwife or an obstetrician, because again, intended parents may have a very different understanding of what birth looks like, what birth sounds like, where it's going to happen. And so really from the profile to the contract, really reiterating for you and for your intended parents what your preferences are and what your plans are. Because while this is your baby, or while this is their baby and it's such a lovely time for them, this is your birth. And my goal for every birthing woman is that they feel empowered, that they have support with them, and that as they move through the pregnancy, that the intended parents are on board and supportive and not, you know, not working from a place of fear, which unfortunately, you know, because of the nature of surrogacy, many intended parents are, you know, have come to us after traumatic birth experiences, late term losses, And so while we are excited as surrogates and we are excited as an agency to support you, we also understand that intended parents often are quite frightened. My intended father in my first journey, I remember once his son was born, he came over to me and he said, "I can finally sleep all night. This finally happened for us." And I was like, "Actually, you will never sleep again, but nice try." And he laughed. And I remember that moment as though it was yesterday, because it was so interesting to me that he had been holding his breath literally for 9 months, but was brave for me, and was brave for his wife, my intended mom. So know, as you are making these plans and speaking to your intended parents about how exciting birth is and how great it's going to be and how amazing, that if they are a little bit nervous and that nervousness comes off as anxiety or fear, just know that they are coming from a place of love, and that I'm going to be doing the same webinar for intended parents, and I'm hoping to really allow them the opportunity to switch from a fear-based process to one of love and commitment and connection to their baby, which some people really struggle with. So for those of you that are pregnant, congratulations, we're on our way. Once you achieve a pregnancy at your fertility clinic, often the fertility doctor will say, "Okay, what's next? Who's going to care for you?" And you'll provide the name of your care provider. And at that moment, it's quite important to ask for to be placed in your hand, not sent by fax, not sent by email, but your chart from the clinic. Because much of that information is very important, not only for birth planning, but for prenatal care. And so being able to take a package with you to your obstetrician, GP, or midwife that explains the nature of how you got pregnant, the age of the egg provider, any other information that may be pertinent, is really, really a great idea. So I always suggest getting that at your last appointment. If you live outside of the community of your fertility clinic, then to have them send it to you by fax, by email. You can print it, you can take it, you know it's there at your first appointment. As well, fertility doctors have great networks. So if you're unsure of a care provider in your community who has supported surrogacy births and is really familiar with sort of the nuances of having other people involved in a pregnancy, I would definitely suggest asking your fertility clinic, asking the agency you're working with, or if you're on any independent surrogacy groups, to ask, "Hey, have you had a care provider in Edmonton or Leduc or wherever that may be," so that you can find someone who will really understand the fact that 3 people in a room, should you have 2 intended parents and a support person, is going to be a thing. Because the birth plan starts way before the birth. You want to make sure that your care provider is going to advocate for you during your pregnancy, at the birth, and after, when it comes to postpartum care, which I'll get to. But I am going to look at the clock. I feel like I've been talking a long time. Okay, so we have a birth plan. If you are on this webinar and you aren't working with us or you haven't seen this birth plan, please email Jordan and she will send it off to you, because we find it's really important, not so that you can keep it on a clipboard at the hospital. As we know, the hospital kind of just does their thing, and we hopefully are able to very clearly advocate for ourselves and what we need. But it is important when we're looking at planning with our intended parents, because again, this is a partnership, and it's really important that it's understood to be a partnership. And why it's so important that it's a partnership is that we come to birth with our own cultural values and beliefs, with our own understanding of birth, with our own history of birth trauma, home birth, hospital birth, whatever that is. We come with that. where our intended parents also come with their own history. You know, I often say to my same-sex male clients, hey, you may want to Google birth, because if you have not had a look at birth, you may want to just sort of get a handle on what that may look like. For many of our clients, if they're in the same community, or even if they can get on an online prenatal class together, I think it's a great idea. Hire a doula for an hour, get on Skype with your intended parents to talk through what birth really sounds like, looks like, feels like, what the plan is around that. Because again, it's really quite important that you know, everyone is on the same page. So when we look at creating a birth plan with other people, it can be a little bit daunting, because of course, you know, we want to ensure that we are, as the birthing women, are comfortable during pregnancy, that if comfortable means medication, that our intended parents know our intention is to take all the medication in order to be comfortable during the birth. If we are planning on a natural birth without medication, it's important that your intended parents know that. And, you know, my suggestion always is to send some, you know, information to them around your birth preferences, so that they know if you are loud, that it is not something to be afraid of. It is something to be empowered by, to know that you are finding that place inside yourself that you maybe didn't know existed or didn't remember existed, and you are finding that power and you are building on it in order to bring their baby earthside. And it is so important that when you explain to them about your births and what birth is for you, that you reiterate, you know, whatever it is you need them to know, how you're planning to birth in a way that is loving to yourself and to their baby. So, you know, you want to let your care provider know, you know, who these people are that are going to be in the room, how you plan to birth, whether that's a vaginal delivery, whether that's a VBAC, so a vaginal birth after cesarean, or an elective cesarean section, which from time to time we hear surrogates saying that that's the way they would like to birth. It's important for them that they don't sort of create this bonding experience that they may be concerned about. They want to ensure that that this birth is nothing like their own births, and it's a way of separation. And so it's important, and we're excited to support women birthing, the end. And when you talk to your doula, your spouse or partner, your best friend, you know, my advice always is to provide them with how you plan to birth. And, you know, as you're having the conversation, looking at them, ensuring that they've heard you, and ensuring that they understand this isn't sort of a conversation, but that based on your experience thus far with surrogacy, with your intended parents, you will decide what that looks like. And it may look very different than previous births that they've attended with you. Yeah, location of the birth, hospital, birth center, home. Hopefully you've had this conversation well before the 25-week point that we sort of suggest doing the birth plan. You know, how you're going to contact your intended parents. And, you know, I hate to say take a look at your contract, but take a look at your contract, because often contracts are very clear on this. You know, when you feel like labor is beginning, to let them know, and being very clear about that. Hey, going to the hospital, I think something's going on. You know, I don't need you yet, but I will absolutely let you know as soon as I know it's real life labor, because sometimes, as we know, we can have stop and starts, we can have a few, you know, false alarms, and we may not want someone sitting there staring at us during a false alarm. However, if you do want someone staring there at you during a false alarm, let your intended parents know you need them. This is likely their first go at birth, and so they don't know. Like, I have intended parents call me every day going, you know, when will I go to the hospital? Like, is she going to invite me? How is that going to work? So really, hey, I think it's labor. Can you come now? Hey, I think it's labor. Stand by. And, at that point, your intended parents will likely notify their lawyer. They may notify their case manager or me directly, or, case manager at your agency if you're with a different agency. But it's really important that sort of everyone knows what's going on. So, the hospital obviously, or birth center or midwife, if you're delivering at home, obviously knows what's going on, but also that the lawyer knows, so that they can begin to prepare the paperwork that, depending on which province you live in, you will sign the following day. If you're in Ontario now, there's a delay of 7 days to sign paperwork. But again, it's still important that the lawyer knows, so they can begin drafting all of the paperwork. So that would come under sort of who needs to be contacted. So when we're looking at, early labor, heading to the hospital, who's with you, are your intended parents cool with you taking photos of them? Are they cool with you taking photos of the baby or having a birth photographer there? All of these little sort of things matter, because, yes, this is your birth, but yes, this is their baby, and sort of how to navigate that. So definitely having that conversation early as well. We just love birth photography. It, is such a beautiful way to commemorate a surrogate birth. And so if that's something you're interested in, there are so many great birth photographers, and they often seem quite keen on surrogacy because these photos just tend to go viral. And so we've seen a lot of surrogates get great deals from new and upcoming photographers in their community. Okay. As you're planning your birth, and you're around the 25-week mark, some care providers will refer you to a social worker at the hospital and say, hey, here's who you would talk to, contact them. And for many of us, it can sort of jar us, like, well, what do you mean a social worker? Like, this is all worked out. This isn't my baby. I don't know why I need to speak with them. And I want to assure you that the social workers that work in the hospital are not the same as a social worker that came and took away your neighbor's child because the neighbors got called on by the other neighbors, or, it's a very different type of social work care. Social workers that work on labor and delivery floors really want to make sure, that your birth preferences are written down, that they know who your alternate decision maker is, should you need a blood transfusion or surgery, or who that person is that they can call should you show up in labor alone, as well, the intended parents' contact details, so that when these two strangers show up at the hospital and say they're here for their baby, that he or she knows who they are. And so these meetings are great. They also, will talk to you about post-birth, what your plan is, who's going to drive you home. Would you like the public health nurse to come and visit you? Which, by the way, I always say yes. Without a baby, you don't get the same kind of follow-up, and the follow-up is so important. Postpartum depression unfortunately happens. Myself, I have suffered from it in, a few of my births, and, many surrogates I speak to have. And so having someone whose radar you are on, having resources available to you provided by the hospital or the public health unit in your community is so important. And so connecting with that social worker is key. If you live in a small community, you may not have access to the social worker. And so the sort of alternate we see is the charge nurse in the hospital. And listen, you can stay as long as you need to after your birth. There's this idea that you have to go home the next morning. Let me tell you, with my now recently turned 6-year-old, I stayed for 4 days. I was not ready to go home. I struggled with her and, with postpartum depression. And so, that night after I had her, and the nurse said, "Oh, this is your fourth baby. Are you ready to go home?" And I said, "No." And she kind of like looked at me, and I said, "I'm not. And I'd like to talk to someone before I go." And she said, "Oh, I'm here." And I said, "No, no, no. I would like to talk to a psychiatrist, psychologist. I need to know I'm okay before I leave." And it was very strange for them because I had had a number of children. I appeared to be kind of sort of functional and normal, and I wasn't. I was crumbling inside. And if there's anything you take away from this webinar, it's this: birth is the most beautiful and amazing process. Birth is the most messy, hard moment of a woman's life. And while the physical birth may be easy, or while the mental process may be easy, it may not be. And sometimes it's hard because it doesn't quite catch our breath right away, it doesn't catch us. But my suggestion to everyone is, once this baby is born, really, like for real, if you even have a moment that you think, "Oh, this is just the baby blues, I'm going to go home and be fine," don't isolate. Ask for support in the hospital. Ask them what the plan is if you do go home and begin to struggle. Make a plan with the charge nurse or the social worker. It really is life saving. We often don't know what we don't know. And if you are a first time surrogate and you're listening to this going, "Oh my goodness, like this is not how I'm going to feel. I'm so excited for my intended parents and I have lots of support," that's great. That doesn't make you immune to postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, or even just simply the baby blues. So having people and having that connection is really important. Oftentimes as well, we would suggest before the birth to also access a therapist through your fertility clinic or through your agency. If you happen to be with ours, we can get you an appointment with Jan Silverman. And that's really just to have a birth pep talk and to really sort of work through any unresolved feelings, any issues you may be having around who's going to be there, or the fact that maybe your birth plan has changed drastically from, vaginal natural home birth to, a cesarean section in a hospital setting. And so really having someone who's not just going to say, "It's going to be fine, you've got this," but to really deconstruct for you what the feelings you have are about. So, so important. And I know for myself, during my second journey, let me think, my fifth pregnancy, I required a cesarean section after not having one. And it was tricky to decide which one person would be coming in the room. And my husband at the time was super gracious and kind and said, "It's totally up to you." And for me, I took a couple of days to think about it and realized, in spending that time, thoughtfully weighing out the pros and cons, realizing that I know for me, when I had my kids, being the first person to meet my baby was everything. I couldn't imagine it being any other way. And so I chose to have my intended mom come into the delivery room and be the first person to meet her babies. I had twins after a very complicated and exhausting pregnancy. I had a C-section that went off without a hitch, and she had her babies, and I rested. And so if your birth plan changes, that can also be a little bit jarring. And so having someone to talk through it, like a therapist, is really great. And I would also, for those of you who are in a journey that maybe isn't going as planned, and maybe you have some disconnection with your intended parents, maybe you haven't been able to get on the same page. Maybe the plan has always been that they wait outside and you have the baby and the nurse brings them the baby. Whatever that looks like for you, ensuring that you are comfortable with what that looks like. And so, if that is what your plan is, to really ensure that the intended parents are aware that that's what your plan is, ensure the social worker understands that's what your plan is. And if you are able to bridge back together and have the intended parents in the room, you can change your mind literally at any moment during your birth. Your birth plan, your birth preference, that can go completely out the window when labor hits and you are like either super excited to try something new or super terrified and are going to try something new. Again, completely up to you. And all I would suggest is talking to your agency if you're maybe not sort of communicating effectively with your intended parents, or talking to a therapist who then can have an appointment with them to really reiterate what your preferences are. Of course, we hope that intended parents are able to be there and be involved. Are they cutting the cord? Are they the first ones to care for their baby? Do you have a plan that the baby's going to go to you and you're going to hand the baby off? Many people dream of this moment just as much as they dream of signing up to be a surrogate. And so as you're thinking about it, whether it's thinking about it and writing it down in the notes on your phone, whether it's thinking about it and creating a vision board during a retreat about what your birth is going to look like, it's cool, because this is such a unique opportunity that I would hate for you to feel as though you were not able to be open about, your preferences. And so for many, having a doula present at the birth, or a spouse or partner who can really help advocate for you to your intended parents is so important. Your intended parents want you to be safe. They want you to be healthy. They want you to be cared for at the hospital. But what that translates into sometimes, and I know for my intended mom, she was literally standing at the wall like this as I was screaming somewhat like a crazy person until I had the epidural that saved my life. Not really saved my life, but at the moment felt like it saved my life. And so, intended parents don't know what they don't know. And so communicate often, communicate early, talk about birth as much as you can, of course, without scaring them. If you're looking for a Father's Day gift for your intended father, because you're having the baby in August, September, whatever that looks like, or you're just wanting to get them something to prepare, the book, The Birth Partner, is amazing, and I suggest it to intended parents, but I would definitely suggest it as well as a fantastic gift that you could send to your intended parents. And as well, send me or send your agency, important things so that they can, remind intended parents of these important things. Again, really important. Are your kids going to come hang out and see you? Are your kids going to be at the birth? Are they going to come the next day? Something to think about for you, not for your intended parents, but what that will look like in terms of your children meeting the baby. And so talking to your intended parents about, hey, my kids are coming. They're going to come the day after I deliver, or they're going to come that evening. And it's really important to me that my kids get to see the baby. And so, just checking in with you what that looks like for you. Again, super, super, important to have that conversation, and whether that's your children, your mom, your best friend, whoever that is that's going to be visiting, because you may be sharing a room with your intended parents. And I'll get to rooming preferences in a moment, but if it is important for your children, especially if your intended parents are getting in the car and driving, 4 hours home the next day, you may not see them for a couple of weeks or a week, or, whatever that is. So please, start thinking about that in your mind of how quickly your family members should come to see you. And of course, to meet the baby. When we talk about rooming, there's this sort of question mark about hospitals accommodating intended parents, hospitals having lots of, empty rooms. And it really depends. If you have a baby on a full moon, likely the place is packed, likely there's nowhere to go. So often in hospitals where the delivery room is also the recovery room and where you stay, often they have like I don't know if it's a couch or like a windowsill, I call it a windowsill couch, that an intended parent can stay in with their baby. And so start thinking about that. How are you going to feel after you deliver with people in the room? And we all know the nurse comes in like every couple hours, to check you out and, massage your stomach and check, your pad and see how you're doing. So really, really sort of figuring that out. And that's another piece for the social worker to ask her, like, hey, if I wanted to be alone after the delivery, how would that occur? And sometimes it's as much as moving you to another area of the hospital. So the obstetrical floor, maybe where women have had hysterectomies and other surgeries. And sometimes it's, oh, we've got lots of room, we're going to accommodate them. But that always, that isn't always a yes, that may be a maybe. Let's see what, the rooming space is in the hospital, and, and really going from there. So, figuring that out and talking about rooming with your intended parents and what that looks like for them. And for some of you, you may go home 4 hours later. If you're delivering at home already, your intended parents may just hang out in your living room while you go, to bed. So again, just having that conversation, talking to your care provider about it, and in your legal agreement, you may have that the intended parents have agreed to a private room for you, but then the hospital just doesn't have one. So again, really beginning that conversation with your care provider and with your intended parents to understand what their expectations are. I've had a number of intended parents ask me why they need to stay that first night in the hospital, because doesn't the baby get cared for by nurses? And when surrogates talk to me about that and go, well, they just want to leave. Well, because that's sort of, in some parts of the world, your baby goes to a nursery and someone else cares for your baby while you rest. In Canada, that's not a thing. However, if you deliver and your intended parents aren't here yet, that can absolutely be a thing. And I want to talk about that. I feel like I have so many things I want to talk about, so I want to, okay. So if you go into labor early, if you go into labor and your intended parents live a few hours away and the baby is just coming and, it's like a train, you can't stop. So, baby's coming, baby's born. You are looking around the room for someone to take this baby. Let the nurse know. I've had many surrogates who have had babies before intended parents come, and they have said things like, I wish the nurse would have asked me if I was okay to be with the baby, because I wasn't. And so really sort of imagining even now, if you're alone with this baby after the delivery, are you okay with that? Would you love those cuddles? Would you, is your plan to breastfeed anyways? Or are you pumping for the baby? Or is the baby going to be formula fed? Knowing those things from your intended parents, and that's kind of like the post-birth plan that I'll go over with them on their webinar. But, having that time with the baby, if your intended parents live in Israel and you're on Vancouver Island, let me tell you, they're 20 hours away. And that's like from the flight to the door of the hospital. And so please know that it's important to have that conversation as well. Who's the decision maker if the baby comes early? Have they asked the lawyer to step in and make any medical decisions? Have they left that to you? And so intended parents speaking to the social worker prior to the birth is also a great idea, so that they can tell the social worker, once the baby's born, what their preferences are. Because we only know what we know in our sort of North American culture. And, if your intended parents are from abroad and their cultural beliefs maybe are different, it would be important that those cultural beliefs are not only understood, but adhered to by the hospital staff. And so if baby comes early, which, can happen, as we all know, many of us know someone who has had a baby early, or maybe we ourselves have had a baby early. And so, that's again that sort of question mark of, if you think labor might be happening, just to go and get checked out. Because if it is, and your intended parents are 20 hours away, you want to give them as much lead time as possible. And hospitals understand, like, when it's surrogacy, it's quite different. And there are people on the other side of the world or the other side of the country that are waiting on information on whether or not they should get in their car, get on a plane, get to the airport, whatever that looks like. So really having that plan in place, it is really important. Okay, I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to just check my notes for the important pieces. Okay, so once the baby's born, cord is cut, they're hanging out with their kid, and you're sitting there and you're waiting for them to come back and let you meet their baby. I can tell you, because I have this text every day from intended parents: should I take the baby over? I don't want to overextend. I don't want to bother her. I want to let her rest. Tell your intended parents what you need, or what you would like, even by a simple text. Hey, I know you're in the room 2 doors down, but I had a C-section. They're not letting me up out of bed. Can you bring the baby? I just want to snuggle him or her, or I just want to see you guys as a completed family. It's really important. So don't miss opportunities because you aren't sure how to ask, what to say. Just say it, just ask. Super, super important that you are communicating effectively and often with your intended parents throughout the entire time. The next sort of piece is, for a lot of surrogates, they may have, and I had these ideas as well, about how this baby's going to be fed. And so many intended mothers, I would say nearly 50% of our intended moms right now are inducing lactation to breastfeed, which is amazing, when 10 years ago it was less than 10%. And so as you're talking to your intended mom through the pregnancy, it's something to bring up, hey, how are you planning on feeding your baby? And reiterating that piece about it being their baby. Oh, you're breastfeeding? Amazing. Or, oh, you haven't thought about it? Cool. Well, if you'd like me to pump, I'm in. Or if you'd like me to breastfeed in the hospital, I'm in. Or I'm not. I didn't breastfeed my children. I don't plan on breastfeeding yours, but thank you for asking. I'm super honored that you would, allow me that experience with your baby, but no, or yes, or whatever that looks like. So please, having that conversation throughout is really important. And knowing that, also knowing that when your intended parents meet their baby, they may become all kinds of confused and forget that they asked you, or they feel like this birth was a really long marathon and they could never say, hey, can you feed our kid? Because they feel like they've already just taken every ounce of your energy. So know that if you had talked about breastfeeding and now maybe they're not mentioning it in the hospital, then it may just be that they feel like they have taken every single thing from you and do not want to ask for something else. So just something to be aware of. And if you want to bring it up to them and, hey, remember when we talked about breastfeeding? I'm ready. My milk is in, or whatever it is that you're gonna say. I know that for many women, birth can be quite, empowering, amazing, also overwhelming. And so if you fall into that birth is overwhelming category, and you just don't know how to ask or don't know how to say, message another surrogate that you know. Hey, I'm not sure how to ask them this. Hey, I'd like to take pictures of their baby. Hey, they said I could breastfeed, but they haven't mentioned it. Hey, go to others who have been there and done that. Go to others, talk to your support person at your agency. Talk to someone who's completed a journey. Message me, to really help you put in perspective, because after birth, we can just be we're on such a high. And oftentimes, feelings start to surface, and we want to make sure that everyone has a very meaningful birth, that everyone has a meaningful post-birth experience. Okay, I have 2 minutes, so if you have questions, please start typing them, because I will answer them in just a moment. Post-birth. So before you leave the hospital, having a plan, having a crisis line phone number, having the phone number to the floor of the hospital so that you can call back and say, hey, this is happening with me or that's happening with me. Having a plan with your spouse or partner, if you have one, or a friend, to sort of be checking in on you, to make sure that you are really supported, really feeling cared for, is really important. And knowing in those next couple of days that with the hormonal shifts, just allow yourself the opportunity to heal, allow yourself the opportunity to rest, because often when we have our own babies, we're like tucked in bed, or we're busy because we've got 3-4 other kids, and so it looks very different. And so getting home, getting into your PJs, getting into bed for as long as you can without your other kids driving you crazy, super important. But if that getting into bed, you're still in bed 3 days later and you haven't showered and you aren't practicing self-care and you aren't reaching out and you are sort of withdrawing, know that that can be a sign of, hey, I better reach out and connect with someone, and letting your partner know, hey, here's what I need. If you see me backsliding, if you see me not showering, if you see me not doing XYZ, whatever your XYZ is, please, call me on it. Ask me if I need help, because I know for myself, asking for help is tricky, but when someone asks me if I need help, I'm okay. And when people, when you're getting ready to deliver and people at church or at work ask you like, hey, I know you're having a baby, but you're not bringing it home. What can I do? You can make me dinner that I can freeze. You can bring me soup. You can come clean my bathroom, whatever it is that is your thing. I know for myself, staying in bed, tucked in for a few days, lots of hot soup, lots of resting, was so helpful for me after my own deliveries. But everyone's helpful looks different to them. And so, figuring out, when you're around 25 weeks and looking at a birth plan, what you need or what you think you'll need, so you can tell people what you'll need. If you are with a surrogacy agency that has a, why is my mind blank? If you are with a surrogacy agency and they have a group specific to your location and someone's about to deliver, it's worth it to post, hey everyone, it looks like Jenny's about to deliver. Why don't we all make a meal for her that she can freeze? Because that action of paying it forward is going to pay it back to you when it's your turn to deliver. And I think if, meal trains are such an amazing way to support women, who have just had a baby, whether theirs or someone else's. And so I would really encourage you to connect with other people in your community on mom groups or whatever, to offer support, ask for support, start talking about meal trains, because they used to be a really big deal and I haven't seen them so often anymore. But I think it's a really, really great way to offer support and also to get support. So I'm out of time. I really hope this was helpful. I guess one last thing I would say is, because I was just texted a question by someone, you don't need to bring your contract to the hospital. It's really none of their business. Your lawyer, the lawyer that will take care of your post-birth paperwork, so your intended parent's lawyer, will send a letter to the hospital. The social worker will also know. Everyone will know this is a surrogacy, but the contents of your surrogacy agreement are confidential and don't need to be relayed to a nosy nurse or anyone at the hospital. If someone has questions about the legality of your arrangement, it's at that point that you would just provide the lawyer's information. So the lawyer who's preparing the post-birth paperwork will contact you closer to the delivery date. And so I would just suggest keeping their contact details in your phone. And the hospitals are familiar often with the lawyers because there are just sort of a few of them that do this work. So, hey, charge nurse, you were curious about my contract. Here's Ellen Embry's number. Here's Cindy Wasser's number, Alex McNabb's number. They're the ones that will be able to answer your questions about that. So thank you for the question. It's great. Jordan, are there any other questions that I can answer for people?
Yeah, we have a few that have come in here. I just wanted to say thank you, Leah. That was amazing information. And I'm about to read out the questions. If you have any other ones, just feel free to send them now. The first one that came in was from Sarah when you were talking about the birth plan and the hospital. And she wants to know, what if the hospital question came up and we never put it in our paperwork?
So do you mean the name of the hospital or?
Yeah, I believe the name of the hospital, picking the hospital she'd like to deliver in.
Sure. So this is your birth, Sarah, and you could deliver at whichever hospital you like. You just need to let let us all know so that we can ensure the lawyer is connecting with the correct hospital for you. But absolutely, if that changes, there's no problem with that. If you move to another province or another community within your province, that can easily be noted.
Great. And I noticed Sarah is saying that there's quite a bit of information here, so she'll have to watch it again. Just want to let you know, if you do have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us by email or by Facebook page. Another question that's just come in from Kyla. Is this all of the information, or is the information that relates to what the IPs need to know going to be in the IP webinar?
Yeah, so I'll be doing an intended parent webinar. Jordan, do we have a date for that I can give out?
Yeah, it's next Wednesday. So next Wednesday, same time, 10 a.m. PST, 1 p.m. EST. So the date for next Wednesday is the 19th, February the 19th.
Excellent. So Kyla, your intended parents could join that call or that webinar, and there will be information for them on the birth and birth preferences for intended parents, including cord blood collection, delayed cord clamping, skin-to-skin contact, speaking about the surrogate's birth preferences and how to best support her throughout the process, what they need to bring to the hospital in terms of a car seat and clothing for their baby, and if they're using a formula that the hospital doesn't use. All of that information will be available to them next Wednesday, and I'm certain some surrogates will log in because they'll be curious as well. And you're more than welcome to log in or to register for it, and we can send you the recorded version should you not be able to join.
Awesome. And we actually do have an intended parent with us today, Louis. He's here and he is wanting to know, in regards to the home birth, what are the special considerations that need to be taken into, such as can the social worker be there, and etc.
Absolutely. So if your surrogate is planning a home birth, which is actually my dream, however, I require a great deal of medication to birth children, and so it will never be for me. But if your surrogate is delivering at home, then the midwife or the midwifery practice will be able to provide you just a ton of information on how that differs. And so I will tell you that a home birth is only available to women in a low risk population for delivery. So women who have had an uncomplicated pregnancy and are at low risk for complications. And so what will happen is the surrogate will deliver in her home. There'll be a midwife and usually a second attending, or another midwife there with her, someone else with her. The requirement is that you live a certain number of kilometers from the hospital. So should a transfer of care happen, if the pregnancy does become complicated during birth. But even with all of that, the social worker isn't available per se. However, you can have a meeting with the social worker in the hospital in your surrogate's community should a transfer of care be required, so that you would have all of that sort of education piece and information. When it is a home birth, simply the midwife registers the birth in the same way that a hospital registrar would register the birth, and the birth certificate is issued in the same time frame. And so there really are no differences other than you would be in her home. For some surrogates, they are really interested in a home birth, but not in their home, because maybe they live in an apartment or they live with other people and it just isn't feasible. And so your agency likely would be able to help you by connecting you with an appropriate accommodations Airbnb, somewhere that sort of has maybe two places, like a duplex, where the birth would happen on one side and then intended parents would go over to rest in their own place. But again, your agency will be able to really work with you on that, should that be something your surrogate is interested in. Is that it for questions, Jordan?
Yes, that's all of the questions. That's everything that's come in today.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for participating in this webinar, and any questions, please send them. If you are now thinking that maybe a doula is a good idea, or you want to talk about hospitals, please reach out to your case manager with us or the agency you're working with. If you aren't working with an agency, but you'd like to chat further, I'm more than happy to connect with you to talk through birth preferences and planning. And yeah, look forward to connecting in the future. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.